Hey there, everyone. It's Leah Piper, your Tantra expert at Sex Reimagined, and I am with the beautiful, the smart, the amazing Dr. Willow Brown, who is, of course, the Taoist expert here on the show. And today we are so excited to have Dr. Alison Ash, aka Dr. Allie, who is an intimacy coach. She's an educator. She's a Stanford University lecturer. She's an author. She's the founder of TurnON.love. And she's an amazing teacher. And we are going to focus today on lovely, awesome oral lovemaking, known as fellatio, known as cunnilingus. And it's time to dive in.
Yeah, so tune in, turn on, and fall in love with Dr. Alison Ash.
Welcome to the Sex Reimagined podcast, where sex is shame-free and pleasure-forward. Let's get into the show.
All right, we are here with Dr. Alison Ash. We're so excited to be here with you, Allie. Dr. Allie, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
We've heard great things about you. Our friends over at the Shameless Sex podcast speak so highly of you. I know you've been on their show. And you are an expert in many things sexuality. And today we're excited to talk about the art of pleasuring one's lover with one's mouth. So tell us a little bit about the people who come to you, who see you professionally, and what are some of their questions? What are their concerns? What are they stressed out about when it comes to oral lovemaking?
A lot of it is just around competency, feeling like there's not much templating, modeling, instruction, support in society to learn how to give and receive quality oral sex. I mean, as we all know, porn does not depict realistic sexuality in most cases. And I think that people want to have that experience of feeling confident in the bedroom and to be able to give their lover pleasure. And I also work with a lot of people on their capacity to receive. Receiving can be deeply vulnerable for some people. And a lot of folks get stuck in their head or don't know how to be more active and co-create the sexual experiences that they're wanting to have. They feel more passive, and then it's like either it's good or it's not good, but they don't feel like they can help guide it to what would make it feel the best for them. And the reality is each person is so unique and so different. So it's impossible to know what every person out there is going to like. We have to learn how to calibrate to each individual.
Yeah, I so agree. I mean, even myself, and I think it comes down to lack of confidence. We want to feel like we know what we're doing. And we also need to learn how to communicate what would improve our experience, like how to direct, how to experience it in a way that our partner gets to win and we get to win with more pleasure.
You know, I think the receiving of oral pleasure is one of the places where we really kind of miss the boat. And like you said, being more interactive and co-creating this juiced up experience with your partner and guiding them like a little bit lighter here, a little bit firmer there, and giving them more direction around what they're actually doing. Because this isn't something that's ever really taught in any sex ed class. And, people are just kind of figuring it out for themselves. A lot of people, once they really experience really good head for the first time in their life, they start to really enjoy their body in a whole new way. Like they have a new relationship with what their body is capable of. So it's such an invaluable thing to learn how to give and learn how to receive. So I love that you're highlighting that piece.
I mean, so many things come to mind. All these complications come to mind just from my own journey with oral sex. You know, I remember when I was younger, coming of age, I really loved it when someone went down on me. And then I went through like 2 decades of going, this does nothing for me. Like I'm just meh. You know, and every once in a great while, someone would be really good at it and I would have a spark plug go off. But it wasn't until recently that I realized I need a combo with oral sex. I need someone to put a finger in and go down on me at the same time. I don't get much if it's just a mouth. I need penetration too. And that feels like a revelation. And I love it being this age. I'm almost 45. And I've been a sex expert for over 20 years, and I'm still learning new things as simple as Well, actually, oral sex isn't simple. And that's the point of this episode, is that it isn't so simple. And it does seem like some people are awesome at it and have a natural talent, and other people kind of suck at it. And I've always thought of myself as someone who really wasn't very good at giving head. I got a small mouth. And as I started to unpack these things, I realized some stuff was informed by early sexual abuse, where oral sex was, part of the experience. And also my attitude had to shift. Mindset has to shift. I just started reading erotica a couple of years ago, and that's changed my relationship to giving blowjobs in a way where it's like, oh, this is all new. This is awesome. This is something I wish I had known when I was 18. So I imagine this is kind of a typical story you hear.
It's not uncommon. And I think one of the things that makes oral sex challenging for folks, whether you're giving or receiving, is that it can be a moving target, meaning that what we enjoy today may not be the same thing that we enjoy in a year from now or 5 years from now. Our desire or pleasure is fluid and dynamic. And that's why having a mindset where you're prioritizing exploration, where you're communicating verbally and non-verbally before, during, and after, where you're not feeling like you have to mind read, is so important, because then it really creates a space for our pleasure to evolve. I often say that we can be a generous lover not only by giving pleasure, but by helping our lovers pleasure us. And so it's this interactive, collaborative approach that I think makes all sex, not just oral sex, so yummy.
If somebody comes to you and they're like, I want to learn how to be better at oral pleasure. I want to learn how to be better at giving head to my partner. How do you walk them through that?
Well, I think that there's 2 or 3 actually main areas of focus. One is technical skill.
Mm-hmm.
One is the communication components. And then the other is the attitude, the way that you're relating to it. And I often say the best oral sex is when I know that my lover is loving it. Like if they're worshiping my pussy and they want to give me as much pleasure, not in a way where I feel pressure to have an experience so they feel good about it.
Right.
But more so where they're just loving it and enjoying it, and I don't have to worry about their experience, and I get that feeling of feeling like my body's being worshipped. Oh, then I can get out of my head and just enjoy and let myself be celebrated in that way. And I know for me, when I'm giving oral sex to somebody else, if I can access that part of me that is worshiping their body and their pleasure and feeling empowered, it's going to be a much more pleasurable experience for me and for them.
Yeah. So like someone's attitude really, really matters. As the giver, it's enjoying the experience as much as you're hoping your partner is enjoying the experience, like really coming with some enthusiasm. And I know that that's always, I think there's a real connection to having better oral sex, and the person who's providing it is doing it because they're getting pleasure from it. Having that loop, that exchange, that they're enjoying what they're doing, helps you relax in your body, helps you feel less nervous. And I think also takes some of the pressure off. If I know my partner is pleasuring me because they love it, then I'm less worried about whether or not I climax. I climax or I don't, but we're sharing in the pleasure together. And it's not like he's going to, or she's going to, or they are going to, have like, I don't like the feeling of agenda. If your agenda is that I have to come in order to give this to me, then it takes something away from the joy of what's possible. It feels like a weight instead of a freedom.
Yeah, exactly. If there's pressure on either side, as the receiver or as the giver, then it, in any sort of sexuality, but especially in cunnilingus and in giving a blowjob. I'm curious about techniques. I want to hear some tips and tools. I'm sure our audience would love to hear some tips and tools. So what are some good cunnilingus techniques, and what are some good blowjob techniques for our audience?
Before you jump into techniques, Willow just, use the language. We've got fellatio, we've got cunnilingus. What's your opinion on language when it comes to oral sex?
Well, I think with regards to language around oral sex and language around genitals, there's so much individual variation around what people like, what makes them feel hot and sexy, or what makes them feel degraded or clinical. And so we might use the word going down on somebody, or giving head, or oral sex, or eating me out, or you can words like cunnilingus and fellatio. And same thing with genitals, right? And I teach a workshop called How to Eat Pussy Like a Champ. And one of the things that I do in the beginning of this workshop is I go through a list of probably 25 to 30 different names for pussies. And I just let people listen to the whole list and feel like what makes them laugh, what makes them feel hot and horny, what makes them feel gross and want to close their legs. And to have these conversations with your partners about what terms do it for you. And I think this is especially important for queer and trans folks, but everybody, even cis hetero folks, I think would really benefit from sharing, like, this word really makes me feel hot, and this word makes me feel like I'm 18 again and having non-pleasurable experiences with those guys that took advantage of me in high school or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So Summer, what are some of those tips that Dr. Willow was asking about? What would you say are like some of your top favorite ones?
We'll be back after a quick break.
Awaken Arousal Oil is my new best friend. Like Laura says, holy forking shirt balls, did it deliver on its promise. I could feel the blood flow and warmth, and that was the easiest I've ever achieved multiple orgasms. This is all natural botanical oils. It is made with CBD because CBD helps relax muscles and it eases tension. This stuff smells so good and it mixes with your pheromones like mwah, so good. Get yourself some. Link is in the show notes.
Well, I think with regards to cunnilingus, there's a few things. One is when you're using your tongue, you can create very different sensations if your tongue is pointy versus
Yes.
and pointy tongue is going to be more intense. A flat tongue is going to feel more soothing. And this is one of the things that some people will have some preference of pointy versus flat. And then also whether or not you're doing your motion on the top of the hood or underneath the hood, pulling back the hood to expose the clitoris. And some people really like direct clitoral stimulation, and other people find that that's way too intense and overwhelming, and they want that kind of stimulation to happen on top of their hood. And a technique I really love to give folks with really any sex, but certainly oral sex is a great arena to try it out, is the this or that game. And you can do, for example, if you're going to try the difference between a pointy tongue and a flat tongue. And one of the tongue movements I teach in my workshop I call it the kitty milk lap, which is a wide tongue like this.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you can do that either flat or pointy. And so with the this or that game, you would do a flat version. And when you say, do you like it like this? And then you would do the pointy version, or do you like it like that? And the reality is that if you ask somebody, what do you like? That can feel overwhelming and too broad. And sometimes you get the deer in the headlights look and people don't know what to say. But if you give a choice, an option, people are a lot more equipped to say this or that. And simply having to discern between this or that helps people get into their body to notice how the sensation is different. And then they get to make a choice, which is very empowering.
I love that. Yeah. So powerful.
Love it. Yes. Okay. So just for review, cunnilingus, that is what would be honoring. In Tantra, we use the word honoring. We would honor someone with one's mouth on the vulva. We talked about pointy tongue versus flat tongue. And communication style would be this or that, giving someone an option for answers. So it's not just an open-ended question, which may leave them stuck. It's like, I don't know what I like yet. This is about discovery. And of course, knowing that to experiment with this, not just once, but in a partnership, in a relationship, and certainly with different partners, you're going to change your mind over different seasons in your life. So this or that is such a great technique to remember when communicating about most things sensual, in terms of what you prefer, what you like, what's happening.
And for most women as well, their sensations are going to change as their cycle changes. If they're still in their fertility years, they're going to have more sensation. They're going to have more sensitivity, right before they start their period and when they're in their ovulation phase. So they might need less pointiness at that time, and they might need more flat at that time. And then also we've got the arousal scale. So when you're paying attention, when you're tuning in, I think bringing presence is the most important piece. So like having all your attention, all your consciousness between your tongue and their pussy is really where you want your consciousness to be. But also keeping in mind, like they might be at a point in their cycle where too much stimulation to the clitoral head is just going to be overwhelming for their nervous system. Or they might not be aroused enough at that point in your sexual journey that day that they can handle that more pinpointed sensation. So tuning into all of that. And I guess, Dr. Ali, how would you guide people in discerning that, reading their partner and where their partner is at, both in life cycle and a month cycle, and then also in that moment?
I think this is such a great point. And one of the things that's so important for quality oral sex is thorough warm up and teasing and foreplay. When we're thinking about cunnilingus, the clitoris, most of the clitoris is actually internal. The average clitoris is about 6 inches long. Only a small part of that extends and protrudes outside of the body. Most of that is internal and it wraps around the vaginal canal. And so in order to create the most pleasure, you want to turn on the brain, turn on the entire body, get the blood flowing to that region of the body. And what happens is that blood starts to pulsate on the internal clitoris. I don't know if you've ever had that aching feeling. I call it female blue balls of like, oh, I just need to get fucked, like aching there. That's because the blood is rushing to that part of your body and massaging and stimulating the internal clitoris. And so, if any massage therapists out there listening, the best way to create blood flow is through massaging. And so massaging the thighs and playing with the lips. I think the lips of the vulva are so underrated and underutilized. And there's such a great way to stimulate and create pleasure. And massaging the ass, all of this creates a lot of blood flow. And I think that it's not just where somebody's at in their cycle or where they're at in their lifespan. It's also how much have you given that body the opportunity to warm up, to feel ready for mouth on vulva or hands in vaginas or whatever else it may be. We can also talk about fellatio, of course. But how are we preparing the body and the mind and the connection? Because all of that's intimacy building. And that's going to really change what somebody is ready for. If somebody feels like penetration is painful, it's probably because there hasn't been enough warm up. Lubrication, self-lubrication comes from blood rushing to the pussy, and then blood plasma seeks through the vaginal walls and prepares the vagina for penetration. And of course, we can supplement with lube, but if there's not enough warm up and stimulation, then that's going to feel painful instead of pleasurable.
And so what would you advise in terms of having someone warm up a body before they start to move towards the vulva and starting to stimulate the vulva? Are there things that you recommend regarding how to warm up that body and how much time someone should take to warm up that body before you decide to go down with your mouth?
I think that's also so variable. It depends on how turned on a person is, how much warm up they like to have. Oftentimes, it also depends on like how much you've been planting seeds and watering those seeds throughout the day or week or whatever else it's been. If somebody's had a really long day and they're stuck in their head or in mom role or whatever else it may be, it's going to require a lot more time and attention than if they're like already hot and turned on because you were just watching some erotica together or whatever else it may be. And that's where the communication piece comes in. But I certainly think warming up, the neck is a great erogenous zone, playing with the breast, if that feels good. Again, for some people, particularly, I think moms, that might not be an erogenous zone for them anymore. And so checking in around that. I often like to really play with that area where the thigh and the butt and the vulva all meet, that wonderful, sweet little crevice. The ass is a great place. I like biting asses, biting, grabbing, spanking, whatever it is that you enjoy. And the reality is that you can just use your hands a combination between light, soft feather touch and then really juicy grabs. And I think a yummy grab is something that's more like an accordion, where you're grabbing and you slowly get tighter and tighter until you feel them kind of like release, and then you slowly let go. Rather than, I mean, sometimes you might want rough sex and it's more of a rough, quick grab. But in terms of preparing the body and the nervous system for pleasure, we want to think about creating diversity of sensation and doing it in a way where you're able to gather data about what's working. And if you're doing it at a pace that's too quick, you're not going to be able to know what's working for them and what's not working for them.
I think that's great advice. I think also like paying attention to the curves of the body, like the curve of the hip, the curve of the side boob, the curve of the neck, the curve of behind the knee, the curve of the outer thigh, the curve of the inner thigh. There's something about bringing your erotic attention. Like I really like it when a partner is with intention in a sexy way, holding my hip versus holding my hip to give me comfort. Like there's a vibration that feels really different when I know they're kind of squeezing, holding, and grabbing. Kind of think of it as like a compressive touch where it's like I feel contained in that moment. And if I feel part of their erotic energy coming from their hand, that lights me up a little bit. So there's something about someone being intentional with their touch. And I think for a lot of female identifying bodies, sometimes we feel like we're being grabbed and taken, and we get lost in translation. It's like, I don't mind if you're touching me for you, but just remember I'm here too. Don't like bring sort of that extra awareness so that my desire is building and catching up to your desire if my partner's desire tends to run a little faster than my own. And I think this is another good this or that opportunity. I know for me, I'm more of an energy person. So if someone comes into my energy too fast, I have a way of shrinking back, where if they come close and then it was like a depth of like sexy awareness, they just kind of hover real close, then I respond to that versus someone coming in and starting to do things too fast. And I know there's people that are like sick of waiting. You're trying to build anticipation. It's not working for me. Would you get the job going? Can we get this started? So this or that, and finding out how fast you want someone to lean in to touching you in your primary erogenous zones. How much does your arousal depend on, the number of sexy messages you got this morning leading up to tonight? And I think that's I think you mentioned it earlier. It's some of those cues. Sometimes getting turned on, starts with a text message or starts with a phone call, starts with a suggestion. My husband today, God, do I even have my phone with me? I don't think I do, but it was so sweet. He sent me the sexiest text. And something about like bending me over and giving me a good spanking, something along those lines. I can't wait for that man to get home. So I think knowing how to plant suggestions could help us feel more turned on more of the time. And I imagine you see a lot of couples who struggle with routine, kind of boring, numbed out sex. Where have you seen the biggest breakthroughs for them?
Yeah, I work with a lot of couples where the sex either feels boring and routine, or I think what's even more common is that because the sex starts to get boring and routine, it starts to feel obligatory and like a chore, and then they start to have less sex overall and they lose the spark.
Right.
And in fact, I teach a whole month-long course for couples called Sustainable Intimacy, Reignite the Flame for the Long Game, because this is something that so many people come to me and need support around. And I think part of it is looking at what are the intimacy blockers? What are the things that get in the way of you having intimacy? Could be things like getting stuck in your head, experiencing pressure, fighting and bickering. Obviously that list just goes on. And then what are the tools that are going to help you find your way back to intimacy? And one of the things I really like to work with my clients around is what I like to call scaffolding structures. So what are the steps that you can take to get from no sex or really boring, predictable, routine sex to the kind of sex that you want to have? And so that might look like exploring sensory-based pleasure and then moving into more sensual pleasure and then moving into more sexual pleasure. That's a common scaffolding structure that really works well for people. Another thing that can be really helpful is thinking about ways to mix it up and to shake up those routines. So with regards to oral sex, that might include different positions or incorporating toys or using erotica, watching it or reading it to each other as either a way to gather more ideas or just as a way to spice things up. It might include doing it in front of mirrors. That can be really hot and create a different experience.
Yes. We just interviewed an erotica writer who does audio programs for people to turn them on. And she had a really great suggestion, which was listening to porn, putting the porn on, but just listening to it instead of watching it and seeing how that kind of opens up the sensory experience. When it comes to fellatio, I'm really curious with the percentage of people that you see, how many of them are just like dying to be touched more, dying to be handled more, not just their genitals being touched, but their whole body being touched.
Well, I think with couples that I work with, sometimes it's feeling touch deprived or maybe not even necessarily touched, but wanting their partner to initiate and be the pursuer more. And also sometimes I work with people with penises where they just have a hard time receiving and it doesn't work for them. And they actually don't like oral sex or they don't know how to ask for what they want either. I mean, that can be a dynamic that transgresses all gender dynamics, of course. With regards to oral sex for men or for people with penises, I think that one of the big factors is how to feel like they're in control while not having their partner feel disempowered. A lot of people with penises want to feel dominating or aggressive or like face fucking or deep throating. And then their partner feels disempowered or worrying about their gag reflex or feeling like maybe pings upon traumatic experiences they've had. And so figuring out how to unpack that so that both people can enjoy a wider range of oral sex experiences.
Yeah. So let's say you have a partner that their experience of giving oral sex, their belief system, their conditioning has a storyline that feels like they feel objectified, or they've had experiences where their partner just grabbed their head and took over and took control, and that started to feel scary. And then you have the other partner who just would love to just fall into it and have this experience more and can't really let go because they're afraid of triggering their partner over and over again. What's a good starting place for them? How do you start to move towards each other when you have that kind of dynamic?
This is another situation where having a scaffolding structure is so helpful, right? How do you get from here to there, setting yourself up for experiences of small wins that increase safety and trust and allow you to gather more data about what works and what doesn't work, rather than going all the way to the intensity and to the extreme and then causing more disconnection or traumatic experiences or something like that. So one thing that I think can be really helpful is to have the person who is giving fellatio be a little bit more in the director and control role. So for example, if you wanted to explore face fucking, which is essentially having the person with the penis be using the mouth as a substitute vagina, right? And they're just kind of penetrating the mouth. A thing that could be a really good first step is to have the person who's giving the oral sex hold the hips of the person with the penis. And rather than the person with the penis controlling the penetration, the person who's giving the oral sex is moving the hips in and out and controlling the pace and the intensity. Another option is to have the giver of oral sex use their hands around the base of the cock, and that's preventing how deep you're going to
Deep.
be face fucked. And over time, as you get more comfortable with it, you can use less fingers. So maybe initially you're using the whole hand, and then you're using 3 fingers, and then 2 fingers, and then 1 finger. So that you are, whether that's in one sexual encounter or throughout a series of sexual encounters, increasing your comfort level with receiving more penetration in your mouth. And then I think the other thing that's important to talk about is gag reflex, because a lot of people
Yes.
have that, and then that can feel scary or like something they want to avoid. And the reality is a lot of people with penises love it when the receivers gag. That's hot for them. And then so that's something to talk about. Because, you know, it's like, do you hate gagging? Do you not mind it, but you're worried that they don't like it? Right. There's a whole conversation there to be had.
Right. Not to mention like the comic relief that kind of comes with it at times. You know, if you're not feeling scared, that is, then it's like, you know, when this happens between me and my husband, we just both crack up, and then we have to take a break because we're laughing so hard, and then we go at it again, and then if it happens again, we're just laughing. And for me, that's like, okay, we're having joy, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think laughing during sex is a wonderful thing. You know, I know some people feel that means something is wrong or uncomfortable, but I think it's great to diffuse tension and just, you know, laughter is a really great way to co-regulate and to bond emotionally with your partner.
Yeah. And there's a difference between like laughing at and laughing with.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is really our playground.
If you do want to work on your gag reflex, I'll just add that you can practice and train your mouth, train your gag reflex so that it gets less sensitive over time. And one technique that you can do is you can use a toothbrush and start to brush the back of your mouth. And don't go so far back that you're already gagging really intensely. Find that edge between where you can tolerate it. The tongue, the back of the mouth, the tongue. And find that area where you can just tolerate it without gagging and brush it back and forth for maybe 15, 20 seconds. And over time, you'll find that you can go deeper into the back of your mouth. And it might take a month or so, but if you do it every day, you're training your mouth that you can receive stimulation back there and that you don't have to.
And can you describe for the audience, for those who don't know, what is it that is so sexy? Why is it so appealing and compelling for a penis owner to want to get that cock further down the throat? Can you share a little bit about, for those people who just don't get it, why it might be delicious?
I think that there's both a physiological and an emotional element there, right? From the physiological sensations perspective, it just feels good to have more sensation, more coverage on the cock, and to feel like you are filling somebody up can be really hot from a sensation perspective. From a more emotional or psychological perspective, it can feel dominating. It can feel like your partner is submitting to you, that they want to take all of you, that they can't have enough of you. And that can feel really good as well.
Yeah. And so even coming from the spirit of that, even if you aren't at a place with your gag reflexes that you can receive someone that deep in your mouth, to come with sort of a devotional attitude of, God, I want to take all of you. And I think there's something really healing about receiving someone, and especially in our mouth, to say, I adore you, I revere you, you are so awesome, beautiful, amazing to me, whatever the adjective is, that shares this moment of I receive you fully. And I think from my background being more of the tantric realm, there's this thing with the eyes where you can really show someone that devotion. And you can also come into this experience of submission, of just going, you know, I want all that I can have. I want all that I can possibly take. And I may not be able to get you all the way down my throat, but boy, I would love to if I could. Maybe sometime in the future. But the attitude of that, I think, can be tremendously healing.
There's something too that's so powerful that opens up the whole Sushumna channel, that central column of light that all of your chakras come off of. So when you are actually able to open up the back of the throat and bring the glands of the penis, the head of the cock, way back into the very back of the throat, you actually can't breathe. So you can't inhale and exhale anymore. So there's also this experience in you where it's like your system is in a state of pause. I almost liken it to like being underwater, swimming underwater. It's quiet. There's this pause. And so there's this pause in your nervous system, which can open up your whole central column, that Sushumna channel. And if you happen to be getting, finger fucked at the same time, or you've got a dildo going at the same time, and you can get all the way up to the cervix, then you've got the top of the Sushumna channel and the bottom of the Sushumna channel both ignited, and it can feel just like an absolute rod of light inside of your body, which can blow open any blockages that you're experiencing in any of your chakras. And to get to that point, you got to have a lot of foreplay, a lot of warm up, and you got to have the position just right. And I think one of the things that we don't remember when we're in the throes of sexuality is that we can pause a situation and be like, wait, this isn't the right position for what I'm going for here. Like, I need you to be at the level of this bed. So you go stand over there, bend your knees a little bit, and like, let's reconfigure. I need a few more pillows under my hips and up above my head. And like all of that is fair game to like pause and reorient your bodies so that you can actually open up these places inside of you in a comfortable way. Because if you're not comfortable, if you're not feeling good, then the other person isn't going to be feeling as good. And as a giver of fellatio or cunnilingus or any kind of sexual energy that you're giving, you want to make sure that your body is in a comfortable position so that you're transmitting ease and presence to that person's body.
Yeah. So Dr. Willow just came up with really great points. We've got stillness, taking a pause, taking a break, having a breath, adjusting your position. Then we have positions, finding the positions that's going to be the most comfortable for you. So you've got the best angles so that you can sit down, hang out for a while. Don't make this a snack, make it a meal. And then we have the receiver's pleasure and the receiver's ability to also find giving to be very orgasmic. So, Dr. Allie, a couple questions to throw at you in regards to all of that is positions. Do you have any tips on positions? And then also the phenomenon of the giver feeling orgasmic while giving oral sex.
With regards to positions, I think that there are two factors most people are wanting to consider. One is what is hot, and the other is what is ergonomic. And we're looking for the intersection between the two.
The intersection between hot and ergonomic.
Right? Because if something is not ergonomic, it's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah, totally.
As somebody who's navigated lifelong chronic pain, I am all about ergonomic sex. So with regards to fellatio, I think one thing that can be really helpful if you have neck pain actually is space fucking, because then your neck is doing less of the movement and you're actually using their body to do more of the penetration. I also think regardless whether or not it's fellatio or cunnilingus, if you're having to support the weight of your head and your neck the entire time, that can make it really hard. And so one thing that I really like doing is being on our sides a little bit and having a pillow underneath the head. And then you can move your head a little bit less intensely, or you can move their body into you a little bit more. And if you are the receiver of cunnilingus and your partner has a beard and it's scratchy on your thigh, a simple quick trick is just take the sheet and put the sheet underneath their face between their beard and your thigh. And that can really help them use your thigh as a pillow without it creating some uncomfortable sensations that you're having to try and navigate while also feeling pleasure.
I'm curious how often you come across people who are stuck in shame around the smell of their genitals or the taste of their genitals. I mean, is that a big one for people? I would imagine it is.
And part of that is because if we think about how society frames, I remember in middle of high school, guys talking about pussies smelling like fish, or just like the way that it was talked about culturally creates a lot of paranoia and insecurity and shame and fear for people. And also, I think that there are some biological things. If you have a bacterial infection or an STI, that can create odors. And so if you're really self-conscious about it, go see a doctor. I do not recommend douching with like perfumed washes, because that can actually exacerbate the issue and cause all sorts of problems. And then part of it is just to realize genitals have their own particular distinct smell. And a lot of people think that's hot, right? My partner is like, oh, put it all over my face. I just want to smell you on me. Like, they get really into it. And sometimes it's also about chemistry and fit, right? One person might really like somebody's odor and another person might find that it's like not really their thing. And that doesn't mean that anything is wrong with your body or the way that you smell. It's sometimes just about a chemistry component. And so, I think if you're insecure, washing, taking a hot shower together, bathing each other before you have an experience can really help it and support it. And then also, we talked in the beginning about worshiping somebody's genitals. You can do that not only by giving adoring, loving, thorough pleasure, but by affirming it, telling the person how hot they are, how yummy they taste, how good they smell. We need to have messages that contradict what society tells us about genitals being gross. We need to get conflicting messages that say your genitals are sexy, amazing, delicious, and yummy to start to unwind some of that negative patterning.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's such an important point to make. Genitals love praise. They love to be told what they look like, what they smell like, how beautiful and thick and interesting, and the color variety. And even if the person who has those genitals has a hard time receiving it, my experience has been their genitals have no problem receiving it, and they will actually respond. I have watched both penises and vulvas get more plump, and just lavishing words on them. I call it a word bath. You give them a word bath, and the person at the top of the body might be going, but the genitals are like, I'm happy, I'm expanding, I totally hear you, and I love this adoration. So if you've never described someone's genitals to them, would you try that tonight, everybody? Would you just go ahead and give it the old test drive, devote your body to science, and you'll see just how sweet and special and loving it can really be, even if it's dirty. I mean, I think there's also the whole dirty talk and being able to find your comfort with that, which I think a lot of people often don't know how to do it. They long for it, but they don't really know how to do it from a place that's in their body.
Well said. I couldn't agree more.
Is there any tips or tools you have for helping people get a little more comfortable with dirty talk, especially in the relationship of oral sex?
I think with regards to dirty talk, a lot of people assume that it needs to be vulgar. And I think dirty talk is more about saying what you want to do to somebody or what you want them to do to you, what you think is hot about them, how it impacts you when you are looking at them or tasting them or feeling them. The devil's in the details. Be specific. Use sensory-based language. Be descriptive and share impact. Share about how you feel or how you want them to feel.
Love it. Love it. Great. If you guys want to hear more about sort of the difference between pillow talk and dirty talk and how to blend the two, be sure to check out that episode. We'll have it in the show notes. So back to, you were starting to share, we were talking about positions and we were talking about the pauses. And there was one other thing I wanted to circle back to. Oh, orgasmic experiences for the giver. Like, can you share tips or just like the phenomenon of how that happens? And how can we have more experiences that feel highly pleasurable, highly orgasmic while being the giver of oral sex?
I think that when people are giving, oftentimes they're giving pleasure for the other person's experience. Like, I'm going to try and figure you out and see what you like the most and treat you like some equation where I have to figure out all the right ingredients in the right proportions. And that can be a very heady, analytical, pressure-inducing way to relate. Yeah, to relate to giving pleasure. I often work with my clients to help them learn how to give touch for their own pleasure, connecting with your own sense of curiosity. What do you feel compelled to do? Can you connect with how the sensations feel on your hands, in your mouth, and your tongue, and the emotional experience, like feeling like you're connected and close and enjoying their pleasure and how hot their pleasure is, not just because you're doing a good job, but because it feels good to you in your own body, and it's staying rooted and connected with embodied pleasure as you're giving pleasure and allowing. It's not saying ignore consent, only do what you like, who cares what they like, but rather than trying to figure them out first and then seeing if you could possibly enjoy it, centering your own experience as the giver and attuning and calibrating and adjusting so that you're still giving them what they want, but you're not forgetting what it is that you're enjoying.
I think that's so powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice. It was actually one of the things that started to heal giving oral sex for me a little bit was going, okay, what if I made love to this cock with my mouth for my own pleasure, and testing to see how my partner experienced that versus sort of the unconfident ways I felt in the past. If I massaged my inner cheeks, if I really like massaged the back of my throat, massaged my tongue, felt it at the top of the palate, and really meditated, treated it like a meditation of like, how alive can I make my mouth feel with this incredible part of their body? And I think, again, there's a little bit of a mindset shift of, I'm not just going to do this because I'm expected to, or I need to be impressive. I think that was another thing that you were kind of leading into before. It's if you're trying to impress someone, that's not always, I mean, maybe you're really good and you're already impressive. That's fine. But if your ego is all about, here, I'm going to be the best at this, I'm going to figure them out, I'm going to type this all out, it can very much become analytical, and people can get stuck in their head, and then they're doing techniques in a row versus really being in their experience with all of their senses.
You know, one of the things that I love to play with in addition to, you know, what you're talking about, making your mouth alive, it's like there's so much more around your mouth. Like you've got your cheeks, your nose, your face. I mean, really give yourself a whole facial with somebody's lingam, and it feels so good just to rub it all around your face. And also when you're giving cunnilingus, just to like really just like bury yourself in somebody's essence, because sexual energy is essence, you know, and essence is what we are at our core. So there's this opportunity, I think, when we can really let go into oral pleasure, where we can really let go of our ego. We can really let go of our persona and who we think we are. And I'm a woman, and I'm Dr. Willow, and I have this, and I have, you know, I have these things in my life, and we can let go of all of that and actually just be witnessed in our essence, which brings that level of true sovereign self more forward in everything we do in our lives. So it's really powerful practice.
With these couple minutes that we have left, I'm curious the advice you have for someone whose partner loves to receive cunnilingus. Like, it's their jam. It is like one of their key buttons to getting them warmed up for penetrative sex, for, you know, feeling everything they want to feel sexually. And they've got a partner who has a real block to it. I know you mentioned the scaffolding. Is there a scaffolding, you know, thought process that comes along with that to support the partner who's resistant to give it, to kind of start to move towards it in a way that's like authentic versus, you have to do this, you know, otherwise I'm just going to be miserable sexually with you forever?
When I'm working with folks in this kind of dynamic, I really want to explore with the giver what the resistance is about. Sometimes it's about feeling like they don't know what they're doing. And so then giving them skills and techniques and helping them feel more capable is the solution. Sometimes it's around having a traumatic experience giving. And so
Right.
unpacking that and helping them move through that experience. Sometimes it's around taste and smell. And so then it's about helping the two of them think about ways that they can shower, other things that they doing it in the bath, places where they can do it where that feels like less of an abrasive dynamic, and helping them just get used to it a little bit more. Sometimes it's about really helping them connect with how much their partner enjoys it. And even if they don't love it, can they really drop into how much they love their partner feeling good? And do it, as you were saying, devotionally, because they're really wanting to help their partner have a particular kind of experience. And so it's a lot of unpacking the resistance. I never want to push through resistance because there's information that resistance has to offer. So we want to unpack it, see what's there, and how we can work with it in a way that's creating empathy and acceptance and support. And that often creates the space for movement.
Do you find when working with a couple in that dynamic that it's better to work with them individually to process some of this out, or do you still like to keep them together for some of that unpacking?
I'm working with couples. I'm doing a combination of individual and couple sessions,
Yeah.
regardless of what the topic is that the couple is coming to me for, because I think there's a lot of material that actually is much easier and feels more supportive and maybe safer to work on in a one-on-one dynamic. Something like oral sex, if I can work with one partner in a one-on-one dynamic and then they bring all of that insight and knowledge and excitement and enthusiasm to the dynamic with their partner, that can feel so good. And sometimes in some dynamics, one partner feels like they've been stuck in this like teacher or therapist role, and that can burn them out. And so having somebody else take that over for a little can feel like a big relief.
Yeah.
I bet that's really supportive and helpful.
Yeah, that's really insightful.
So tell us about the two courses that you have coming up.
One called Sustainable Intimacy, Reignite the Flame for the Long Game. This is for couples who are finding that they're not having the quality or quantity of intimacy that they're wanting. And we give really practical, experiential tools and practices that help you overcome your intimacy blockers and figure out how to reignite the spark and really to keep it sustainable. It's like practices that will work for long-term relationships for the long run, not just a momentary boost of pleasure. And we are offering it live in October. It's a 4-part course, but we will also have it on demand. So if you're listening to this in the future, you can still find it on my website at TurnON.love.
Oh, good.
And then in January through March, I teach an 8-week-long course called Sexual and Emotional Intimacy Skills. It's also a course that I teach at Stanford University, but I love taking it out of the confines of academia and offering it to the masses at large. And this is a wonderful course for individuals or couples so they can learn a lot of the fundamental skills that are so important for having healthy and nourishing intimacy. Some things like boundaries, expressing needs, how to get out of your head and be more embodied, nervous system regulation, how to enjoy giving and receiving more pleasure, and increasing your capacity for pleasure, exploring erotica and fantasies, and navigating conflict. I mean, the list just goes on. So you can find out about that on my website as well. I have a discount code for listeners. Love Sex will give you $100 off the live offerings of either of these courses. And then I'll also just put out there, I teach a workshop called How to Eat Pussy Like a Champ. If you happen to be in the Bay Area, it's going to be live in November in Oakland, but I also have an on-demand offering of the course. If you go to TurnON.love/workshops, you can see a wide range of on-demand workshops that you can access from home at any time. And then last but not least, feel free to reach out for a consultation if you want to explore working with me in a coaching dynamic.
Love it. So fantastic.
Great. That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here. You brought so much to the table. One quick question regarding the courses. When your courses, are they online when you say live, or are they actually come to you?
Great question. Live, I mean that there's live instruction. So it's not just pre-recorded. The sustainable intimacy and sexual and emotional intimacy skills are both virtual courses. I do also do in-person teaching in the East Bay and in San Francisco. And How to Eat Pussy Like a Champ is an in-person workshop. But I do also have an on-demand version of that, which means it's virtual, but it's pre-recorded.
Okay. So if you're in California, be sure to check out Dr. Allison in person for some of these courses. But hey, you don't have to be in California to learn from her. So thank you so much. We'll have all these links, including the coupon code, in the show notes. So check them out.
Thank you, Dr. Allie. It's such a pleasure to be with you. We'll see you all soon.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed talking with the two of you.
And that's going to be a wrap. Yeah. Love, 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 love.
Now, our favorite part, the dish.
Dr. Alison Ash, it's time to dish on her and the episode. What are you thinking, Dr. Willow?
I thought she was just so wonderful. You know, I love that she teaches at that college that I can't think of the name of right now.
Stanford.
Yes. How very,
Yeah,
very
Stanford.
cool that kind of information is getting out to Stanford. And she speaks so plainly and so simply and so eloquently to giving cunnilingus and fellatio. I thought that was great.
I did too. I think she had some really great advice. You know, I really doing the this or that. I think especially for the female brain is so helpful than having an open-ended question regarding what your preference is, what to lean into more. You know, when we were talking about cunnilingus and, you know, flat tongue, pointy tongue, I gotta say, girl, I do not like a pointy tongue. You can leave that pointy tongue home.
Depends for me on how aroused I am.
Oh, okay. So do you like it more pointy
Later
little
on,
later in your
when I'm
arousal?
more aroused, clearly. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, higher arousal. Yeah.
Yeah. Although I have to say, I don't often know what they're doing down there. You know, I don't know if they're pointy or flat. It either feels good or I redirect them, and then it feels good when I redirect them.
That is so interesting because I immediately know if it's pointy or flat. I think I'm really picky, which is why I haven't always enjoyed oral sex, is I can be very particular. I'm like flat mouth and more energetic skill set. Like I'd like to start with panties on and feel like the heat of breath and coming underneath the panties, like sort of playing out the whole forbidden thing.
That always feels good. Yeah. Yoni's like warmth.
Yes. Yeah, and I just kind of like the idea of someone's trying to get into my pants, but they haven't fully gotten there yet. So then the underwear is like a slow peeling off versus just like, okay, face in, we're going at it. I need like a really slow, what's the word? Like, I need a slow approach. I like a lot of face rubbing at the lower belly, at the inner thighs. Like, just don't go straight for the pussy. It is my personal preference.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true for so many women, and yet they don't have the language for it. And if they do have the language for it, it can come out sort of critical to their partner's ears. And I think that, you know, that's one of the things we maybe didn't touch on so much, which maybe we could just touch on here a little bit more, is how to talk to your partner about doing it differently. I mean, there's always the positive sandwich where it's like, that feels really good. And can you go a little lighter, or can you go a little bit more to the left or to the right? I mean, you can really make directing your partner part of the foreplay, part of the sexiness, part of the game. But it requires, I think, really being in your body and being able to access your own sensation so that you actually can feel like, instead of saying, oh, that's too much of a pointy tongue, or that's too sharp, or that's too direct of pressure, you might want to say something like, I love that you're going down on me right now. And, you know, I would love it if you lightened your touch about 75% and pulled your whole head back like about 3 inches. So you're barely touching my clitoris, but I can feel your breath on it. Or, you know, just giving them more specific direction and guidance. And for men too, where like if a woman's going down on you and you're like, okay, she's, at least she's trying. Maybe you've been in a partnership with her for a long time and, you're finally getting a blowjob, yet it's dissatisfying. How do you give her the message and the language in a way that doesn't just shut her down for another, 5 months because you've waited 5 months already for this BJ?
Right. Because, especially when you're already sensitive and you don't have a lot of confidence and you feel like you always do everything wrong and you can't get it right. And I mean, there's such a spiral of fear and self-consciousness that arises when you don't feel like you're great at a skill set and like oral sex. And so you really do have to be mindful in terms of how you direct your preferences. And there's something about like someone directing traffic with a really irritated voice, like that is just, you're aiming for a disaster. So I think the whole positive sandwich is a really good advice. Also, I think blending in words with sounds, like if it's really important that we affirm our partner, so when you get into it, like also use your hips, like show signals. I'm always kind of using my body to guide my partner's attention. And that takes some practice. Also takes a little bit, got to get over some of the self-consciousness in order to feel like you can move and not just lay still. I think sometimes people act like a biology frog. They're just waiting to get it over with instead of, remembering that this is something they get to enjoy too.
A biology frog. Oh my God. Next time I have someone going down on me, I'm going to have the image of a fucking biology frog. Thanks a lot, Leah.
Well, hey, you could just go ribbit. Ribbit.
Oh my God.
Baby, that feels so good. Ribbit.
Ribbit.
Back to the pointy tongue thing, because I think I'm just like hooked into it. So, how I read all these books and there's always all these oral sex scenes. And it's actually kind of been great because now I do want someone to fuck my face. And I've never wanted anyone to fuck my face, but I have a whole new appreciation for face fucking. But in the oral sex scenes for cunnilingus, for women receiving, it's always this like pointy tongue penetrating their vagina. And I need to like get back into the lab and go, how do I feel about someone trying to penetrate me with their tongue? I don't think I've ever liked that. Do you have a feeling or a memory or connection to that technique?
Maybe perhaps you haven't been warmed up enough, or it hasn't felt like you haven't quite had the right penetration at the right time and at the right moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed it for sure. But it does require being like at a certain level of arousal. And
can you feel the distinction?
Yeah, I can feel the distinction. Usually it just makes me want more penetration.
I'm like, just give me a finger.
Yeah. Then it's like, well, let's go there. Let's do this.
Okay.
It's a lead in. It's part of the scaffolding.
Yes, it's part of the peak arousal experiences when to deliver the old penetration with tongue. What about for you, your journey with giving fellatio?
Oh, I'm a big fan. How
has it changed for you over the years? Or is it the same?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, how has it changed over the years? Yeah. I can't remember. I know like I had some experiences early on. Like one time I was in a shower with a guy and actually like it was deep. We were deep throat. He was going so deep and he was more in control I can't remember, but to the point where I actually threw up. Thank God we were in the shower because that was a little embarrassing.
Oh, did you?
And I've had clients too that I've helped who have had that same experience where they actually vomited. And it's, on the one hand, it's embarrassing, but on the other hand, it actually feels kind of good for them. And I think I have been a fan of it and really enjoyed it for such a long time now that I can't remember a time where I didn't enjoy it. I mean, I know there was a time when I didn't love it the way that I love it now because I didn't have the sexual sovereignty that I have now. Like I didn't see sexuality as part of my health and my vitality and my whole being. I saw sexuality the way that we all grew up seeing it as like, you have to be sexy and look right and do it right and have all this pressure on you. So I think that was when I didn't enjoy it. But once I stepped into like, owning my sexuality for my own health, vitality, pleasure, enjoyment, then it was always really fun for me. So I also didn't have any trauma around, oral sex ever in my life. And I know I've worked with so many women who
Sure.
have. And what's so interesting, because I do a lot of craniosacral work, and there's a lot of craniosacral work that can be done inside the mouth. And so I work with people vaginally, and then I'll work with them orally inside of their mouth, not together at the same time, although sometimes, but mostly like I'll go into the mouth and start to release these knots of tension and these things. And I notice that their pelvic floor starts to release as well. Or I'll go into the pelvic floor and then it's like all of a sudden their jaw softens and opens.
Well, one of the things I didn't mention in the episode, but I'd love the chance to mention it here, is that we have sphincter muscles, not just the anal sphincter muscles, but we have vaginal sphincter muscles. We've got sphincter muscles in our throat and in our mouth and in our eyes. So when you relax one sphincter muscle, it relaxes all the other sphincter muscles. And I think that could be a good thing to remember when you're training your throat and your gag reflexes to relax. And I don't know if you caught this because we were having really challenging internet reception during the episode. So sometimes Dr. Will was weaving in and out. Did you miss the part when she was talking about using a toothbrush and the technique to help train your gag reflexes? Oh, it was so interesting. So she's like, take the brush to like the back of your tongue. And then you can kind of play with just right at the edge of the gag reflex, let it hang there. And then you can swish the brush back and forth along the tongue at that same angle and keep on increasing it. And you'll gain better and better control of your gag reflex as a result. So I'm going to give that a try. I thought that was great advice.
Yeah. That's great advice. And I actually teach a deep throating class as well. And I think that even just using like your finger in the back can even be softer and easier than a toothbrush. Something that's hard and plastic can be a little foreign, but something like your finger getting back in there. I mean, we're opening this up for a lingam, ideally, right? So it's soft.
Even like a dildo.
Yeah, a dildo. A dildo can work too. But the softness of your own finger, plus then you have more control over it.
Small one to start.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, happy cunnilingus and fellatio, everybody. I hope you did enjoy this episode. I think Dr. Allie's really awesome. Can't wait to have her on the show again. Please give us your feedback. We love to get your comments. I've been meaning to tell you, Willow, today that I've been reading all these YouTube comments lately.
Oh, great.
And it's been so fun to respond to them. And you guys, you make our day when you give us your insights from an episode, even if you can't stay for the whole show, anything that just tickles your attention, we want to hear about it.
Yeah. So like us, review, give us your comments, and tune in, turn on, and fall in love.
Yeah. Love, love, love.
Thanks for tuning in. This episode was hosted by Tantric Sex Master Coach and Positive Psychology Facilitator Leah Piper, as well as by Chinese and Functional Medicine Doctor and Taoist Sexology Teacher Dr. Willow Brown. Don't forget, your comments, likes, subscribes, and suggestions matter. Let's realize this new world together.